Hello there, world of tankers. Welcome back to another one of my videos. I am Droodle's Blitz, and today I'm going to be talking about the Panzer 58 Mutz. Now, this tank is currently in stores for the price tag of 7,500 gold. It comes with full equipment slots, 30 days of premium, and the legendary camouflage. So it doesn't sound like a bad deal, but sometimes these tanks aren't the best. So as always, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the vehicle, how to run it, where to run it, all the statistics you need to know, and of course whether or not you should be sticking this tank in your garage. And taking a look at the statistics of this vehicle, you'll actually notice that the gun is really good. Not only does it come with 2,400 damage per minute, which is definitely on the higher end for a tier 8 medium vehicle, it also has 212 millimeters of standard penetration, which pretty much means that any tier 8 heavy tank you're going to come up against, you should easily be able to penetrate right through the front. And if you can't, just load the premium ammo and you're going to go all the way up to 259 millimeters of penetration. And because the tank doesn't do a crazy amount of damage at 225 on average, the tank has an excellent reload of only 5.6 seconds, which means that really you're going to tear apart any enemy tank you run into, and pretty easily as well. Because of that damage per minute, it just keeps pumping shell after shell. And not to mention, the tank has 10 degrees of gun depression, which makes it really flexible on pretty much any single scenario you do get stuck in. Some of the issues with other medium tanks, especially the Russian ones, where you have a tank like the T-54 Mod 1, yeah, sure, it has great armor, but if you're on a map like Desert Sands and you're going dunes, you just can't fight a tank like the Mutz, because it's going to use its gun depression, and it's going to bounce the shots at the turret, and it's just going to tear into your tank. And moving on to mobility, which is one of the most important topics for a medium, because if you don't have a fast medium tank, well, what's the point of it being a medium? But this tank can go 50 kilometers per hour forwards, which is definitely not one of the fastest speeds for a medium tank at tier 8, but it has an excellent power to weight ratio of 20.95, which means that even on very hilly terrain and rough terrain where most medium tanks might slow down quite a bit because their power to weight ratios just can't keep up with the terrain, this tank easily stays at 40-50 kilometers per hour on pretty much any terrain you get stuck on, which is one nice benefit. And as well, the tank can go 20 kilometers per hour backwards, and you can see me here on mines. I'm constantly pulling out, shooting, and backing up as quick as I can, so it's really nice that you're able to get out of some really tricky situations where some of the medium tanks that take a little longer to back up, you might get shot in the front track wheel, or just pens where you won't in this tank. As well, the tank can turn at 66.82 degrees a second, and when you combine that with a 43.74 turret traverse speed, it is really good at turning. So if anybody gets spotted to the side of you or behind you, you can easily turn your tank around and snap them right where they are. And the really nice thing about this tank is that it just has such excellent dispersion values while moving. So you can see here, even while I'm trying to chase that T-49, the dispersion on the gun barely even blooms. So I've had multiple instances in this tank where I'm driving at an enemy and I'm just shooting at them, and 9 out of my 10 shots will easily connect on them just because the tank is so accurate on the move and as well sitting stationary. And when you take a look at the armor profile of this tank, you can see it's definitely not one of the thickest mediums on the battlefield. But the nice thing about it is that it's about 150 millimeters thick on the upper plate, which doesn't sound by much. And yes, it's not very thick relatively, but the nice thing about it is that it's not possible to be high explosive by vehicles like a T-49, RHM, ISU. So most of those vehicles would normally derp on a tank that doesn't really have thick armor on the front. But the nice thing about this one is that it actually has some decent armor. As well, lower plate's still about 120 millimeters thick, which is just enough to not being high explosive by an ISU or an RHM. You can also see it has some pretty troll spots on the armor. It's got these little edges on the front which are pretty steeply angled, and you can see that some rounds are actually going to bounce off of it. I've actually had a couple troll bounces on the vehicle myself, and that's just because it is such a funky armor profile. You can see though, the side's only about 33 millimeters thick, and even the turret's only about 60-70 on the sides. So you do want to keep the side of your tank away from the enemy, because they will easily get high explosive into it. But the nice thing, as I said, is that the tank turns so quick, you're able to stop people from getting shots into the side. Now, when using your gun depression, you can see that it's still pretty easy to penetrate. Some rounds are going to bounce off of the upper plate of your tank, but if you're hiding your hull armor of the vehicle and you're using the turret, you can see that the turret is very, very thick. In fact, the gun mantlet goes upwards of 250 millimeters to all the way up to 300, which means that pretty much any round that's going to be hitting it is going to bounce. It does have weak cheeks, though. That is one thing you also want to keep in mind, is that you don't just want to sit out in the open. Just because the gun mantlet is strong in this vehicle, that doesn't mean you want to sit out in the open and let the enemies aim at you, because they're easily going to penetrate through your cheeks. So you want to pull up, use that excellent aiming time on the vehicle, snap the shot, and back up. But if you do that, I've had many bounces on the turret of this vehicle because it is just so troll. So I personally really like the turret and the armor profile of this tank. And onto the topic of how to run this vehicle, because it is quite a bit different than your average run-of-the-mill medium. It's got a little bit weirder armor profile, it's a funky shape, and as well, the tank just doesn't have as much alpha as your average medium tank. But one thing the vehicle does have is it has really good gun depression and a solid turret. And because of that, I'm able to actually run this tank very aggressive on good maps. You saw on mines, I was running it up against the T-32, IS-2SH. These are big, bad tier 8 heavies, and I'm able to easily counter them because I've got good penetration, excellent turret armor, and great gun depression. You do not want to run this type of tank on a map like Himmelsdorf as aggressive as you would on a map where you have gun depression capabilities. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind, is if you're on a map like Desert Sands and the mediums push dunes, you can be very aggressive, but you don't want to show your hull. If you show your hull, then you're probably going to be penned every single time. So when you're on a map like Himmelsdorf, you really can't be aggressive. You want to stay a little bit further back, be more of like a support medium, because every tank's going to pen you. You can't hide your lower plate, you can't hide your upper plate, and because of that, you got to be a lot more careful on some city maps than you would on a map with gun depression. So my suggestion is, if you pick up this tank, the main thing you want to do is you want to make sure you know where you're going to push this vehicle. If you're on a map like Desert Sands, you are not going to push this tank town. You are going to push it dunes. If you're on a map like Port Bay, you don't want to push it to the town side again. You want to push it across the river, use your gun depression. You definitely don't want to push this tank anywhere on flat terrain where you're going to be going up against tanks that usually have higher alpha, that have more penetration, and are just going to rip apart your vehicle. Now, before I do say if this tank is worth the 7,500 gold, I just want to keep out there as a forewarning that this is not an easy tank to run. These games may make it look really easy just because I'm pulling them out. I'm usually just sitting out in the open. These are really lucky games, and half the time you're not going to get a result like this just by being this aggressive. So you definitely have to know your boundaries. You have to know where to push the tank and the map. So if you're a newer player with, I'd only say, a couple thousand battles, and you're looking for a new premium to put in your arsenal just to earn more credits and to win more than you lose, I would definitely suggest to stay clear of this tank for the moment, at least, because you can do a lot better in a tank like the Type 59 or the Mod 1 than you would be doing in this vehicle. But if you are a more experienced player and you know the maps and you know how to use gun depression effectively, you are going to love this tank. And for the price tag of 7,500 gold, I think that it is worth the price. Because not only are you getting the tank with full equipment slots and the camouflage, you're also getting 30 days of premium. And unlike a Mod 1 where it doesn't have the best penetration, so half the time you're firing premium ammo, because you don't have to fire a lot of premium ammo in this tank, really, you earn a lot more credits than you would think in the tank. You're earning 80,000, 70,000 credits a game. I used to run credit boosters with this tank because I'd earn so many, upwards of like 150, 160,000. And the nice thing about this tank is that it doesn't get boring to play after a certain number of games, because some of the tanks I have in my garage are just collecting dust because they're not fun to play. You play them 5 or 10 or games or whatever, or just try to master it, and then you're like, well, it's not very fun, it's not enjoyable, and that's it. This tank brings new challenges every single game, and it's very fun to play on the battlefield. So as I said, I definitely think it is worth the price tag if you know how to run a tank like this and you do know your maps. But this is going to be the end of the video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. As always, make sure to smash that like button down below if you did. Let's get this channel up to 6,000, 7,000 subscribers. Hopefully Wargaming eventually will give me a contributor account. And if you're wondering why the aspect ratio on this video is weird, I'm still trying to figure it out, but for some reason, Adobe Premiere on the iPad doesn't want to make it full screened. So I'm trying to figure that out. But for now, it's just going to be like this for the next couple of days while I'm waiting for my new computer to ship. But I hope you guys still enjoy the content, and the reviews should be even better quality very, very soon. And I want to thank all of you on Patreon. If you do want to help me out on Patreon, make sure to click that link below if I do remember to put it down there. Make sure to click that, and it will bring you to my Patreon where you can help support the channel. But other than that, guys, I hope you did enjoy the video, and I will see you in the next one.